Alright, good afternoon YouTube. I'm Cross the King, StanStrength.com, and in tonight's video, I'm going to be talking about Mike Israetel's 5-week hypertrophy program that you can find on liftvault.com. So, another program review. Most of my program reviews will come from LiftVault because I do think that it's kind of like the, I guess, library of free workout programs that anyone can kind of take and use. And Mike Israetel, he's actually one of my favorite resources and reliable resources for bodybuilding information. And generally speaking, I use a lot of the information because he's very well read on all the literature. And there are things that I disagree with him on, but that's more due to the fact of my personal training philosophy rather than disagreeing on any of the scientific claims that he makes. So this program is meant for advanced to intermediate lifters. So this is going to be, I think, the first non-beginner program or non-beginner friendly program that I've ever reviewed. And I think it's necessary. So there's a very popular article of training volume landmarks. So training volume landmarks, the most important ones that you need to know are your MRV, MEV, and MV, and I think there's a couple that I'm missing, but MRV is maximal recoverable volume. So this is the amount of total sets and reps that you can do that you will be able to recover from, but anything above that, you're going to find yourself having a severe case of diminished returns where the marginal gains that you are receiving are not worth the cost of the amount of energy that you're expending or not being able to recover from. Like if you're unable to recover from it, then it's not worth it. Or if you are receiving type of gains from it, but it will allow you to or force you to run into a wall faster than usual, not worth it, right? So that's MRV. MEV is the minimum effective volume. This is literally the amount of volume that you need to do to stimulate some amount of muscle growth. The bare minimum where you can say like, oh, I grew some muscle. There are times when this is actually very useful information to know. For example, and this goes into, before I go into that actually, I'm going to talk about MV, which is maintenance volume, which is just how much to maintain the muscle, and that's very, very low. So it's very important to know these variables because if you are trying to specialize on a specific movement or muscle, it can be very useful to put something that you're not super keen about, something that might tax you a lot even, on maintenance or just at your minimum effective volume. This is something that I do with squats. For my squat, I squat solely for the purpose of keeping my legs healthy and trying to increase my deadlift through a non-specific means by just strengthening all the muscles in that local area. So that's why I program my squats very differently. I stick very close to MEV and somewhere in between. But anyway, let's get into more of what the program is going to be talking about. So if you haven't read those articles that talk about volume landmarks for muscles, it's actually a very useful article because it actually teaches you how to properly program to an extent when it comes to the actual numbers and prescription of sets and reps that you divide across different movements and different days. It's very, very useful. So I know you'll hear numbers kind of thrown around depending on who you ask. Menno Henselmans, I think he says that 8 to 12 sets per muscle group per week is more than enough, and then you might hear others where it's closer to 10 or 20. And there's a lot of nuance. The reason why there is that huge range is mainly because there's other factors beyond just volume. There's intensity and there's frequency. How frequently you're training will allow you to hit your volume more easily, but also the higher intensity you go, the less volume you'll be able to handle. As any one of those variables go up, there's going to be a cost to the other two variables. So let's see. This is a 6-day hypertrophy workout routine that runs for a 4-week mesocycle and includes a deload on week 5. Let's see. There are some extremely important concepts about hypertrophy explained below. Please read them. So we will go over them today. Adjust your starting weights. So, okay, there's a spreadsheet and we'll go over all that. So let's see. Maintenance volume, like I discussed, is the number of sets needed to maintain your current muscular size. It's actually very, very little. The amount you need to maintain size is very different from the amount you need to build it. So if you are one of those trainees who's worried about getting too damn big or too damn strong, you can stop and just go to maintenance volume whenever you want. There's a couple people in my gym who I know for a fact because I talked to them, they've been working out for close to 20 years and literally they just come into the gym to maintain their muscle and that's all they do. They just do enough to maintain the muscle and maintain leanness and whatnot, and that's all they do. They don't care about building size anymore because they're a bit too old. They've been working out for 20 years and they started when they were in their mid-20s, so they're starting to get up there in as far as physical years go, so that's why they only do maintenance. Minimum effective volumes, MEV, lowest number of sets needed to increase your muscular size. MAV, maximal adaptive volume. So that's one I forgot. So maximum adaptive volume is a volume range where most muscular growth occurs. This is kind of like the Goldilocks zone, if in my understanding. So basically, most of your training should be held here. Really, when it comes to MRV, that's kind of like saving it for the end of a mesocycle, saving it for specialization. But generally speaking, most of your training needs to occur in the MAV, that Goldilocks zone, where you're getting the most amount of muscle growth. Kind of like if you were to look at a graph where it kind of curves and it peaks and then starts to slowly diminish. You want to go to the point where the amount of effort you're putting into it gets the most amount of gains, and so the cost is very much worth the profit that you're getting from the training that you're doing. But anything above that, you're just getting so much marginally less gains. Even if you are making progress, it's just not worth it for the amount of energy expending. So that's MAV. Yeah, so read those articles. Really get a strong understanding of that. So I really do like how there's how to find your maintenance volume. I'll probably make videos on this like later, because for power building it will be a bit different than just for straight up bodybuilding. But let's get into the actual program. So let me pull that up real quick. All right. So just as just the general overview, so I'm going to kind of go over what I think of the overall exercise selection. And just looking at day one, I read day one before I started recording, and I actually do think that this is a very good day one. My biggest issue is the fact that I am not a fan of only doing one movement pattern. So I don't like the idea of push days, pull days, and leg days. To me personally, it's not the best for power building. You can get away with it with bodybuilding, because in my opinion with bodybuilding you have a lot more freedom than anything else, because there's a lot less constraints. Because really the only goal you have when it comes to bodybuilding is building muscle. So building muscle is fairly simple. It only becomes complicated when you add other constraints. So for example, with power building, you're trying to also build size. And when you are a strength, so when you're trying to build strength, the intensity is higher. So the amount of training that you're doing, the intensity of your training, the amount of time spent in the gym, these variables will start to change as you start to add constraints. And by constraints I just mean other variables to your training. So day one, it's basically an chest day, upper body day, or I wouldn't say upper body because it's a push day. You're doing a barbell bench press, barbell standing press, weighted dips, cable flies, barbell shrugs, upright rows, easy bar curls, and machine crunches. Very good exercise selection. I like how there's not too many pressing movements. You could classify the weighted dip as a pressing movement, and just kind of depends on your level of fitness and also how you perform the dip, how your joints feel about doing dips. So it's just very different there. So for example, if someone had to replace the weighted dips with a different tricep exercise, you can do something like a nose breaker or skull crusher and overload that movement and even use it on a Smith machine. I like using the Smith machine for that purpose. I think it's one of the few things that it gets right. But those are the modifications you can make as far as that exercise if you are, let's say, not able to press as much as others. But with dips, if you're keeping your body vertical, very good for triceps. And then you go into chest flies, barbell shrugs, upright rows, easy bar curls, and machine crunches. So one thing I will say is that when it comes to a lot of these programs, especially like more bodybuilding focused programs, like you already know, I'm really one of those people who will say just superset all the things, but really where it kind of makes sense. So for example, with the barbell bench press, the standing and the barbell standing press or overhead press, those two for sure don't superset when you're running this program as written. You don't have to superset it there. Weighted dips and cable flies, I kind of think you can superset them, to be honest. I actually think that it, because for one, you're doing triceps and then you're doing chest. Like, if you want to save some time, superset those. But another thing you can do is just don't superset the first three, but then cable flies and barbell shrugs, yeah, superset those. Upright rows, easy bar curls, and machine crunches, superset those. So the accessories, just split them up into two supersets however you want and superset them, and they'll be golden. Day two, high bar squats, leg press, calves on leg press. So this is probably best done as a superset. So because you're already on the leg press, just do calves while you're there. Front delts, seated dumbbell overhead press. I do like how you're doing a barbell overhead press on day 1, and then you're doing a dumbbell overhead press day 2. When it comes to building muscle, one very valid way to go about it is to actually train it this like the day after you do a heavy movement on it. So for example, you make your shoulders sore with the barbell movement when you're able to overload it. Sorry, I just have to check the time because I have work later. Because you're able to overload it, but then on the next day you do a lighter variation, and you can feel this variation more because you already have some leftover soreness from the previous day. So that's very useful. Traps, you are now shrugging again, but you're using dumbbells, so different strength curve, different implement, but you're still stimulating the muscle. And traps, you can train them very frequently. There is no reason in my mind why you shouldn't be able to train your upper back and especially your traps very frequently. You take a rest day on day 3, and day 4 you go into sumo, deficit deadlift, stiff leg deadlift, barbell bent row, pull-ups, and machine crunches. So finally, some back. When it comes to the back, I think the back can actually handle the most amount of volume of any muscle group, just because there's the 2 biggest muscle groups in your body are the legs and the back. The legs, for most movements, so the best movements, let's say squats and leg pressing. Leg pressing, not so much, but for squatting, definitely it has a huge cardiovascular component, especially if you do high reps on squats. So the feasibility of doing leg squats every single day can be done because it's a huge muscle group, but how it should be done, or if it should be done in general, is kind of debatable. But when it comes to back training, I am a huge believer in training your back every day. Alternate between pull-ups and rows, or kind of grease the groove, because for me personally, most people can't do enough pull-ups. They can't do enough chin-ups, they can't do enough pull-ups. I am heavy as all hell, and I can still do a lot of chin-ups and pull-ups throughout my workout. So there's really no excuse in my opinion, and it never really posed too much of a whole systemic fatigue issue for me personally. It's something you build up to over time, definitely, and your exercise selection and the weights you use has to be very specific as well. But it can be done, and in my opinion, it should be done. But finally, at least there's some back here. So there's that. Day 5, incline, close grip bench, wide grip push-up, overhead easy bar, extension, superset. I think that's what that means, superset with incline close grip bench. I'm so sorry, my dog is crying outside. I'm gonna play with him after this. But dumbbell side laterals and dumbbell curls. So this is a chest, triceps, and rear delts and bicep day. I would recommend supersetting the dumbbell curls and dumbbell side laterals. I mean, you're by the dumbbell rack already, why not? Overhead easy bar extension and close grip, incline close grip bench. So I mean, you already have it here. I mean, I would just do a different exercise entirely, to be honest, to really maximize the tricep involvement, but it works. But let's move on. Smith machine feet forward squats, love those. Those really blow up my quads, feel them immediately. Smith machine calves, easy superset to do. Dumbbell rear lateral raise and dumbbell upright row, supersetted. Dumbbell occlusion curls, I think that means blood flow restriction, if I'm not mistaken. I don't do that kind of stuff, and occlusion is kind of a big word, so who knows. And hanging knee raises. I like how there's abs at the end of the program, but one modification I would make for, let's say, some lifters is that if abs are a point of improvement, do abs with every exercise. I think Brian Alsrew really hit it out the park when he just does the antagonistic supersets, so agonist, antagonist, superset, so a push and a pull, and then an ab variation, and then he rests. Now, me personally, I'm too damn fat to be doing ab exercises. I need the main ab exercise that I do is fork push-aways, so that's for me, but for anyone else, that's fine. Then day 7, you have weighted pull-ups, cable rows, lying leg curls, and glute bridge. So from my understanding, what's going to happen is that it's a 5-day program, but as you can see, there are 6 days, so one day will not be done the next week, from what I can guess or assume. So let's look at week 1. So, oh no, it looks like you're doing them, you only have one rest day. And so that's something I will comment on. But anyway, let's look at the sets and reps. 4 sets of 8 on the barbell bench, 3 sets of 8 on the standing barbell press, 4 sets of 8 on the weighted dip, cable flies, 4 sets of 12, barbell shrug, 5 sets of 10, then 3 sets of 10 for upright rows, 3 sets of 8 for easy bar curls, and 3 sets of 10 for machine crunches. So this is kind of where the power building and the size, the saving time kind of part of me comes out. Because for one, let's look at this. If you were to do that, this is 29 sets. This is 29 sets in one workout. To me, that's kind of excessive. But you also have to take into consideration, I train at higher intensities. So that's something you need to take into consideration when I say 29 sets in one workout is a bit much. And also, all of this, which it comes out to about, let's see, 14 sets. I'm not good at math. It tells me like what it is, but this is 14 sets. So 14 sets. So really, it's like 15 hard sets and then 14 sets of accessories. So not that bad. But here's one thing to kind of take consideration. How much rest are you getting in between? So for barbell shrugs, 2 to 3 minutes. You do 5 sets of that. That's 15 minutes of resting, not including the amount of time that you're spending doing the actual movement, which probably isn't much, but let's say it takes you about 20 to 30 seconds to do a set. Do that 5 times, and you have about another 2 minutes. And this doesn't seem like much, but that's just one exercise, and you've already spent like 15-20 minutes doing this. I would want to save some time, you know? So that's why when it comes to a lot of these accessory exercises, just superset them. Superset would make sense to you. So for example, weighted dips and upright rows. That to me is a superset that can make sense just from the fact that when you're doing a weighted dip, you're using mostly triceps, and then you're doing an upright row as some type of pull, so a push and a pull. And when you do weighted dips, your shoulders are involved, but not really your rear delt, but now you're doing a rear delt focus exercise. So why not superset that? Other thing that can be taken into consideration when it comes to supersets is superset movements that have the same amount of sets and reps. If you're going to do 3 sets of 10, or sets really, if you're going to do 3 sets on one exercise and you're going to do 3 sets on another, just superset them one after the other. So that way, for example here, when you do your upright rows, go into your easy bar curls, and then go into your machine crunches, you've rested enough from enough time has passed since your upright rows, probably, and if not, take a minute, because then it will have been 2 to 3 minutes since you did your upright rows, and you're good to go. So that's a modification I would make as far as how the program is structured. And let's move on from there. So here we have 30 sets in a workout, and the reason why these volumes are so high is because with bodybuilding style programs, volume will be high because overall intensity is fairly low. They're going to be most bodybuilding programs that are focused purely on feeling the muscle, purely on the mind-muscle connection. Chances are you're going to be lifting anywhere between, I would say, 60 to no more than 80% of your max. It's very unlikely for you to go above that. Even going above 75 for most good bodybuilding programs is kind of my guideline or my recommendation, mainly because you're going to be doing 30 sets. If you're going to be doing 30 sets, it doesn't make sense to have most of your sets come from high intensity thresholds, meaning above 80%. So sticking between let's say 50 to 80, 60 to 80, whatever. Sub 80%, but definitely above, I would say 40 or 50%, in my opinion, 1 RM. That's kind of where you're going to have to stay because your volume is so high. So that's why the volume is high. That's why for bodybuilding programs, intensity is lower, because for them, when volume is equated, the amount of size gains that you get, let's say doing 3 sets of 10 versus 10 sets of 3, is not that different. However, the size gains or the strength adaptations is very different. Now, those are both very subpar ways to train, but that's just the example I want to give. Then you do a rest day or a conditioning day. So here, the problem that I would say with conditioning is the fact that it can, especially when you're training this frequently and you have a deadlift day the next day, conditioning has to be very careful. It has to be something with a very, without a concentric or eccentric component, so probably like a sled push or something like that, where it's not going to impact the next day. And so that means running is out of the question, because running is very eccentric focused, so you're going to run into problems if you run and then you do deadlifts the next day. 4 sets of 8 for sumo deficit deadlifts, and this is a good rep range. 8 is kind of where I cap out any form of deadlifting, maybe with the exception of a Romanian deadlift, but even then, I just kind of prefer pushing the intensity on that movement and doing less reps. But that's just me. This is still very, very good. Stiff leg deadlift, 3 sets of 8, good as well. Barbell bent row, 4 sets of 8, good as well. Pull-ups, AMFAT, AFAT, as few as possible to 30 reps. Okay. So as few as possible for 30 reps. So basically, you have 30 reps to do, and you're gonna try to do it in as few sets as possible. So each set you do is an AMRAP until you hit 30 reps. Machine crunches, 4 sets of 15. So one thing I will say, like with as far as like reps go, is that the reason why I like ranges is because if you're going to be pushing closer to failure, you probably won't be able to replicate the effort. But with bodybuilding style training, you want to be able to replicate the effort. So that's why the intensity is so low, the volumes are so high, is because you're just going to be repeating the effort and then trying to build up over time. So let's look at week 2 real quick and see if there's a difference. So you just add weight from what I can tell. So let's see, sumo deficit deadlift. So let's see, sumo deficit deadlift, 5 sets of 8. So you add a set. So yeah, let's look at the progression real quick. I'm sorry, I'm like hopping all over the place. 5 sets of 8 again, but I think with a little bit more weight. Yeah, with a little bit more weight, and then 6 sets of 8 for 225. So yeah, with bodybuilding style training, like volumizing your program is going to be the main way to make progression as far as most bodybuilding style training. And that's a good way to go about it. As I said, there is a dose-specific relationship with volume and building muscle, and keeping the intensity low allows you to get more volume. So there's a bodybuilding advantage there. Let's see, 5 sets of 10. Let's see. So that's about 19 sets. Wide grip push-up. So push-ups, my biggest issue with push-ups is just that after the novice stage, so after you have established a base with push-ups, so let's say if you can knock out 40 to 60 push-ups, like as a top set, or like as like a like if you were to just test how many push-ups you can do in like let's say a minute or something like that, and you can knock out 40 to 60, you're pretty good. So at that point, you will need to add weight. After 20 reps, you probably need to add weight. You need to modify the push-up in some way. So having your feet elevated, using rings, adding weight, that's going to do more for your chest, in my opinion, than a wide grip push-up would. But that's my thought process. 30 seconds of reps, so 30 seconds of rest. So this is something that can actually make this a bit more effective. It's the fact that because you're going to push your muscles so close to failure in the first set you do, unless you can hit 60 in one set, then this doesn't apply. But let's say you hit 30 in the first set, then you hit 10 or 15 or something. These are just numbers I'm pulling on my ass. But because you push to failure on that first set, every rep on the subsequent set is going to be a lot closer to failure than it was in the first, meaning you're going to activate more muscle fibers per rep. So there's an advantage there. A map. Cool. Let's see. So I do like how for these two exercises, it is just as many as possible. When it comes to a lot of isolation exercises, that's kind of how I prefer to do it. Like for example, with side lateral raises, the reason why I like ranges too is because when you give yourself a range, you're basically telling yourself, I'm going to do as many reps as possible, but if I don't hit the minimum amount, it's too heavy. And if I go above the maximum amount, it's too light. That's why I like ranges. It's because you're always going into each set with the mentality of as many reps as possible. And this applies to mostly accessories. You're applying the mentality of as many reps as possible, but you have these parameters that will show you whether or not what you're doing is useful, conducive, and time efficient. So 3 sets of 10 with 30 pounds. 30 pounds on a lateral raise is very good. So 10 reps is about how much I could probably do with it. So not too big of an issue there, but still, like, you want to kind of go into that mentality of if you do 10, 8, or 10 or 12, 10, 8. That's 30 or no, it's not. Is it 30? Yeah, that's 30. So that's 30 reps. So, but you're pushing closer to failure on each set. So, and this is just a horrible example, but if you're pushing each one to failure, chances are you could get more than 10. And with accessories, that's a lot easier to do because on a compound exercise, pushing a compound exercise to failure is so much more taxing. You have to go into a much deeper, darker neurological place to really push through these exercises. So when you do your isolations and your accessories, however, where there isn't much of a stimulus, a damaging stimulus, or like a stimulus that is too hard to recover from, push them shits to failure, bro. So let's move on. Smith machine, foot forward squats, very good. I will say that when I do this exercise, but this is something to take consideration too. I have horrible knees. I injured my knees multiple times throughout my life, so I have a history of injuries with this. So when it comes to the Smith machine feet forward squats, I like to really just control the eccentric down, and I focus mostly on time under tension rather than just reps. And I will average 6 to 10 just because that's what my knee can handle. And I swear to God, if we ever work out together and we do squats, it's going to sound like my knees are beatboxing. So that's kind of what it sounds like. Just, yeah. Anyway, 8 sets of calves. I mean, you're doing 4 sets. So this is basically what I'm like looking at, right? You're doing 4 sets of feet forward squats, right? Then you're going to do 8 sets of calves. You can superset the first 2 or the first 4. So then you're going to be there for 4 more sets just doing calves. I'm not team no calves by any means. I mean, I was morbidly obese, so the necessity for me to train calves is not as high as other people. But still, man, like, come on. 8 sets of calves, like, and also like 12 I think is the bare minimum for calf reps. I think calves are one of those exercises where, because it's such a small range of motion, do a shit ton of reps. Like, just because the amount of weight you're moving, how far you're moving that weight, and the amount of weight that you can use. Also, just because of how short of a range of motion it is. Like, obviously he's compensating with the fact that he's doing 8 sets, so maybe that's why it's 8 sets. But even then, just what I would personally do is cut it down to 4 sets and bring this up to 20 plus. Save some time. Because for me, this is very much from the powerlifting side of perspective, but generally speaking, one thing I do like about most powerlifters is when they're focused on their workouts, it really is get in, get out, recover. That is their MO, that is their purpose. That is why for them, like, without the caricatures of those who bring lawn chairs to the gym, for them, like, they're just there to get a job done, and that's it. So I'm not saying that this is bad. I'm just saying that there's, in my opinion, in my estimation, better ways to go about this. So here it is as many as possible for lateral raises and upright rows. I much prefer that over on these 2 exercises, dumbbell curls and side laterals, it was not as many as possible. And then as few as possible, so sets as few as possible, and then you're hitting a certain number of reps. Very good. Back, weighted pull-ups, cable rows, lying leg curls, and glute bridge. Because you're working out so frequently, like, it makes sense that one of these days is going to be very short. It just kind of pains me that it's back. So when it comes to bodybuilding, my very first bodybuilder that I knew about who wasn't Arnold Schwarzenegger was Frank Zane. And to me, his proportions and especially his Y taper was just the best thing. And that's why I put such a huge emphasis on back training. Now, I need to put a bigger emphasis on shoulder training as well, but your shoulders and back is what adds so much size to your frame, and that just really completes your physique. So it kind of pains me that back is almost the exercise that's kind of put on the back burner, for a lack of better words. So that's a critique I have of that. So Dr. Mike Israetel, he clearly knows what he's doing. He's a very smart guy. He has a great physique, and he's trained with Jared Feather, who's an IFBB pro, so he definitely has the credentials. But when it comes to, like, how recommendations I would make for the natural, normal lifter, non-competitive lifter, I think there's better ways to kind of go about it that allows you to save time. Because for me personally, if you're not a competitive lifter, it's not going to consume your life. and it's not the thing you want to spend most of your day doing, and even if it is, it's not the thing you should spend your entire day doing. Just because you love bodybuilding doesn't mean you should spend 3 hours in the gym doing it. There's just modifications that I personally would make. And so my overall review of this program, I don't know, B. There's a lot more I like about it than dislike. So I'm gonna give it a B though. Like a B, like a solid B. Like not B minus, maybe B plus. Like there he could, like I could curve it or something, I don't know, but for one, I actually don't think he wrote this, to be completely honest. I think that is just kind of like taking everything he's written in his articles and just kind of putting him into a program. So I don't think this was written by him. Yep, so it was not written by him. It was just it is really just written by someone else who just took everything that was in the articles and put it into a spreadsheet. So yeah, if you were to run it as written, your back volume just is very little. Like the amount of pressing that you're doing, you need to do more back and rear delt volume, in my opinion. Like at a bare minimum, it needs to be a 1-to-1 ratio, and maybe even a 1 to 1.1 ratio, where you just do a little bit more back. Like that's my personal opinion. But yeah, this is definitely a B. So not written by Dr. Mike, but so Dr. Mike's information is really good. Read his stuff, but this actual program that you find on Lift Vault, I think is not the best representation of what Dr. Mike Israetel would actually write or recommend, in my opinion. So yeah, solid B. 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 But anyway, I'm CrossFitKing, StanceReady.com. So have a great day. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching. If there's any programs you want me to review, if you want me to review your own program, I would love to do that. So if you've gone through this whole video, thank you so much. Have a great day. Oh shit, where's it stop?